on my greeters, if our greeters could walk down the aisles with the handouts for a minute. If you don't have a handout, we'd encourage you to get one of these and to fill it out. So if a couple of my greeters could do that. Guys, I normally preach to you from about a page and a half of notes. After last week's message, we had such a strong response. I started my message prep weeks ago, and I had by the end of Monday, I was at 14 pages. And so we're going to cover so much ground today. I've actually got it down to 2.5, so don't panic. But I've got so much ground to cover in today's message that we're going to move pretty quick. And so I want you to stay with me. Today's message is super practical. Because we're talking about relationships and specifically about marriage relationships, but so much what I'm going to tell you today can apply to any relationship that you have. My friend, my family, my kids, whatever. And so I want you to hear it from that perspective. We've been looking at this really through two texts, primarily through the Song of Solomon. And in Song of Solomon, you have a couple that is older, that is looking back over their life, and they're having an honest look at their life. Some things in their life were great, and some things in their life were difficult. They had joys and pains and issues. They had experiences where they woke up and somebody had morning breath, and they had experiences where there was kind of quirks in their personalities and bumps in the road. I know that none of you have ever been in this situation, but occasionally in any relationship, you get to a place where you go, I love you, but I don't like you right now. No one else knows what that feels like. Okay, good. All right, so anybody been there? Come on. All right. Yeah, we get there all the time. And more than likely, it's the person you're sitting next to that did it to you. And so it happens to everybody. It's normal. It's natural. It's going to happen. That's why being in a committed covenant relationship is so important. Because at times when I don't feel that love, I have the promise that holds me true. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when you hit those bumps. Specifically, we're talking about the issue of emotional connection and sexual intimacy. Two things that are so profound in our relationships. When Crystal and I got married in 1998, we packed up all of our stuff. At the end of the wedding, we got done with the reception. We didn't get to try any of the food that we picked out. And we got into a car, and we were both starving. So we went straight from there to a Japanese restaurant in Dallas, Texas, and had Japanese food. And so it was kind of a weird start to things, but then we headed to the hotel, and in the back of our car, we had baggage because we were going to go stay the night. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was excited about it. And if you're listening to our series called Playlist, this is the point in the playlist where you're putting on a little Luther, a little Barry White, okay? Yeah, you're getting that kind of music. That's the song you're playing on the playlist. A big song in 1998, the movie Armageddon had come out. Oh, I could stay awake just to... Oh yeah, some of y'all started too high for you, sorry. I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep because I miss you, babe. Oh yeah, it was a powerful song. And you just want to go, oh, I'm playing that song right now. And then you're like I don't know, as guys, we always go to the lower voice. What's up, girl? Like I always think of that guy from Boys to Men. Hey, baby. Like, it's just, do you want that song? But the truth is, you want to jump to that song on the playlist a lot of times, but we're not ready to. Or you're in that I love you, but I don't like you right now kind of place. And sometimes it can be really hard to get out of that. And it's because in addition to all the bags we knew we packed, we also had some other baggage that we brought along with us. And so we have to address that stuff. If you're going to have emotional connection, that's where we're going to start today. If you're going to have emotional connection to somebody, you have to know who they are. And I don't mean identity like, oh, it's Crystal. I mean, what are their struggles? What are their pains? What is their past? What are their burdens? What are their hopes? What is their future? And that is something I need to know. Not only that, I need to know what they respond to. I need to understand what makes them tick. I need to understand what motivates them. For Crystal, she knows me. She could give me gifts, great. She could do incredible things for me, that's wonderful. But if she speaks words of encouragement, woo, I get filled up. And for Crystal, I could say words all day long. And she's going, show me, sucker. She's like, you got to do something. You want to? I love you. Great, vacuum. Like, she's an acts of service kind of person. That's how she understands love. We need to know, how does this person feel loved? And I need to speak to them in the language that they understand. Not my language, their language. And so I'm going to give you, next week we're going to talk specifically about conflict, but for right now I want to give you some keys to how to make sure that you maximize emotional connection. And you can use this in any relationship. As a matter of fact, this part is going to come out of Ephesians, and I told you in week 1, Ephesians is this beautiful book. It is considered the pinnacle of the writings of Paul. It is split perfectly in the middle. First 3 chapters is all about what God's done for you. There are 41 commands in the book of Ephesians. Only one happens in the first 3 chapters, and it's to remember. That's it. Just remember what God has done for you. First 3 chapters is all about you did nothing, God did everything. This is how much He loves you. And the back 3 chapters goes, if you understand that love from God, then this is how you behave to each other. And it's going to explain it in every possible relationship. And it's going to say, this is what it looks like. And so here's one of the things that it's going to say in the book of Ephesians is that you need to learn to outserve one another. If you got taking notes, write that down. Ephesians 5, 1 through 2 says, therefore be imitators of God as dearly loved children, and walk in love as Christ also loved us and gave Himself for us a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. Serve somebody. Well, they didn't earn it. Serve them anyway. They don't deserve it. Serve them anyway. Why? Because God did that for you. Stop negotiating and start serving. You need to show sincerity and effort and have a gracious spirit even when you don't feel like doing it. You didn't deserve the grace and forgiveness of God, and yet He lavished it upon us. I love, and I said this, I had a wedding and a funeral yesterday, and ironically there was a part of both sermons that were the same. And it was this part. John 3:16, I approached in both of them and says, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. And here's the part that jumps out to me, is we always go, love is the verb, love is the verb. Love, I'm not an English teacher, but love is not the verb of that sentence. Gave is. That God sacrificed. That's what love is, to give away. He served us. His love, or the way that we understood what love was that He gave. It was a demonstration. And it's hard to stay angry with somebody while you're serving them. Number 2, you need to believe the most generous explanation for their behavior. Have you ever had in any relationship where something bad happened and you immediately thought all of the worst possible things about their motivations, about their words, about everything? I mean, like seriously, there's elbows flying in this place right now. Like some of y'all, you're like, this is happening with spouses. It happens. But listen to Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm in the wrong place. Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, putting away lying, speaking the truth, each one to his neighbor, because we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Don't start to believe that person in your life, it's a marriage. If it's your marriage relationship, they are your partner in ministry. You attack problems together. You don't attack the partner. Don't begin to believe the worst thing about it. Now, I'm not talking about abuse here. God is anti-abuse. Abuse is off the table. I'm talking about other things. I'm talking about, ladies, when he leaves the toilet seat up. Don't start believing like, oh, he doesn't care about me as a person. No, he's just lazy. Okay? When he clips his toenails in a part of the house you don't want that stuff, and he doesn't vacuum it up, or when he says something dumb, let me tell you, if you're going, what's the motivation behind him saying something dumb? He's dumb. Or guys, when she squeezes the toothpaste tube in a way that God never intended for that to happen, let her have some grace. Or when she wears for the 4th night in a row the it's not going to happen flannels to bed, don't assume it's rejection of everything you are as a person. Don't believe the worst things. Ladies, when you're sitting there going, can't he just read my mind? No, he's thinking about a sandwich. And that's it. Help him. Number 3, beat each other to the apology. Cannot tell you how powerful this is in a relationship. Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another. Now that's one thing to go. When we talk about forgiveness, I've said this to you guys before. When we talk about forgiveness, we all become second graders on a playground. You know what I'm talking about? Say you're sorry. She started it. Say you're sorry. Well, he did this first. He did the most of it, so he should have to apologize first because he did the most first, and then I'll apologize. And we're grown. We're not supposed to forgive as a response to how other people forgive. It says in this verse, forgive one another like God forgave you. See, that one's not lopsided. He didn't do anything wrong. It's all on you. And even though it's all on you, He forgave you. And that's what we've got to bring into this. Number 4, if it's important to you, it's important to me. If you're married, I want you to look at your spouse right now and say, if it's important to you, go ahead, do that part. It's important to me. April, come on. Here we go. All right, now listen. Right, you're writing. I know. You can multitask. You're a girl. All right, so listen. If it's important to you, it's important to me. Ephesians 5:21. Submit to one another in the fear of the Lord. Submit is, and we're going to talk more about that text next week, but submitting to one another. I'm going to look to your needs before my needs. You may, and the guys, listen, has your wife ever lost it and you're like, I don't understand what you're even upset about right now? Like she's like a crazy person. Anybody ever thought that? Anybody ever said it? Idiots. All right, so I'm with you, okay? That stuff happens. Here's what we need to say, guys. Learn to say this. I can't sympathize with what you're needing right now. It doesn't make sense to me. But I do want to empathize with how you're feeling because you matter to me. I don't need to understand what has you upset or why. I just need to know that you need my help and support. So guys, and I pick on guys because we're dumb. Don't ever say, just get over it. Why? Or I'll see you in my office for counseling. Okay. We don't want to do that. You need to courageously love. That means that what they need, I long to fulfill. Where they hurt, I long to support, even if I don't understand it. If you want emotional connection, outserve one another. Believe the best about them. Beat them to the apology. And always let them know that what matters to them matters to your heart. And I tell you, the emotional connection between the two of you will be strong. If yours is broken right now, I dare you to begin doing these things and you will see a difference in your marriage. I promise you. If you have the courage to do it, you will see a difference. Now, there are those of you going, I don't think there's any hope. Listen, I'm just going to tell you from the Lord right now, get some guts and try something different. Man. Sexual intimacy. I got to move on. We got to go quick. Oh, yeah. Now, the church I grew up in, you didn't talk about sex or sexual intimacy in church. I'm going to be honest with you. It's the understanding that I had of sex in the church I grew up in is that the devil entered through your private parts and you needed to always be careful of that. Here's the truth. Some of y'all just get super uncomfortable right there. I say that because we don't talk about this in church, but guess what? Everybody else talks about it. Yeah. See, God is the inventor of the joys and the pleasure of sex. And so we need to understand God's perspective on this. Our culture is going to look at sexual intimacy as a first step in a relationship, but what God is going to give us is a picture of sexual intimacy as a last step that enters into a covenant. And so it is totally messed up. And if the church isn't going to speak the truth about this, then we are going to continue to have trouble in our culture. And so let me tell you something. I remember the first time I was asked to speak about, they called me into a high school when I lived in Kentucky. They said, we need you to come give the sex speech at high school. Prom's about to happen. The sex speech in high school basically goes like this. Go tell all the kids that if anybody has sex, everybody's going to get AIDS, everybody's going to get pregnant, and they're all going to die. I'm not joking. That's the message you're supposed to send. And so I went in and I said, I'm ready to go. And the principal, like 30 seconds before I was supposed to start speaking, goes, what's your message? And I said, I'm going to tell them how to have the best sex of their life. And he was like, what? And I was like, gone. But I went out and I told them, I said, man, let me tell you why God is so pro-sex and why it's worth waiting for. And it was a totally different perspective. When it's done right, man, it is a thing of beauty and glory and worship. Now listen to this. I want you to see the movement of this through Song of Solomon. So we go back to Song of Solomon because I love this book. In Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verses 10 through 16, this is her speaking to him. I tell you, ladies, your husbands, those people that you get in your future, even if you have a friend or a young man that's your child, speaking words of positive encouragement to them, oh, you have no idea the power. Here's what she says to her husband. My love is fit and strong. I don't know if it's true, but I love hearing it. My wife sometimes looks at me and goes, you're in great shape. I know she's lying. I'm okay with it. Okay. Notable among 10,000, his head is the purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes like doves beside flowing streams washed in milk and set like jewels. His cheeks like beds of spices and mounds of perfume. His lips like lilies dripping, flowing with myrrh. His arms like rods of gold set with beryl. She's making him feel so good. His body an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli, and his legs are alabaster pillars set on pedestals of pure gold. His presence is like Lebanon, majestic as cedars. His mouth is sweetness. He is absolutely desirable. This is my love. And I love this. This is my friend. And then she goes, young women. She's telling her friends, like, that's what I got to say about my man, girls. Let me tell you something. Whew. That'll get it done. Here's what happens next. He speaks. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. How beautiful are your sandaled feet, my princess. The curves of your thighs are like jewelry, the handiwork of a master. The navel is your rounded bowl, and it never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a mound of wheat. Now stop. Given you this advice before. Some things are cultural. Don't call her anything a mound of anything. Okay? No mounds. No mounds, no heaps. If you've got that in your translation, skip that part. Your belly, especially her belly. Your belly's like a mound. Shut up. All right, so your belly is like a mound of wheat surrounded by lilies. Your breasts like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck like an ivory tower. Your eyes like the pools of... I mean, he just goes on and on and on. And at the end, he says, may your breasts be like clusters of grapes. And the fragrance of your breath like apricots. Your mouth is like fine wine. And then in Song of Solomon chapter 7, verses 9 through 11, immediately following this, she responds to him. She has built him and encouraged him and told him that he is desirable and a friend. And he looks back, and in spite of all of her insecurities, and if you read the whole book of Song of Solomon, she is horribly insecure. He looks at every part of her body and says, no, you are a work of art by a master craftsman. And boy, that makes her feel a certain way. She says, flowing smoothly for my love, guiding past my lips and teeth. I am my love's, and his desire is for me. She feels wanted. Come, my love, let's go to the field. Let's spend the night among the henna blossoms. It's on. Don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall. I mean, like they hit that on the playlist, and it's beautiful. And then listen, here's what this is. In chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. This is all a result of one thing. He set me as a seal on his heart, as a seal on his arm. So it's not just internally that he says, I'm his and he is mine. It's on, you can see it on his outside. His outside represents that his love and desire is for me. He says, for our love is as strong as death. I don't know if you know this, but death is unstoppable. The mortality rate in America is 1 per person. It comes for everybody. And it says, our love is unstoppable like that. The jealousy is unrelenting as the grave, as Sheol. Love's flames are fiery flames, an almighty flame. A huge torrent cannot extinguish our love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. Do you see the order? Do you see the wisdom? You see what leads to intimacy here? It doesn't start with intimacy. It starts way before the bedroom. It starts with fulfilling fears and insecurities and all of these things. And there's a beauty to it. And there's a sacrifice to it. And there's a surrender to it. And it's supposed to give us an understanding of something. Sex reinforces the commitment. In Song of Solomon 4, 8 through 9, it says, come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the peaks of Ammon, from the summit of Senir and for Hermon. He's saying, you're far away from me. And I can't take it. You're too far. It says, from the dens of lions and from the mountains of the leopards, you've captured my heart, my sister, my bride. You've captured my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. He's saying, I can't, this intimacy that I crave can be fulfilled by no one else, and you're too far from me. I need you to be close. See, it's a commitment here. He can't go somewhere else and fulfill this desire because it was always meant for one. In Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 16, it says, my love is mine and I am his. That love is an exclusivity. It is supposed to be this. Now, some people will make the argument, they go, well, Song of Solomon's written by a guy that had 700 wives. Yeah, and it worked out horribly for him. That's not an example of what to do. As a matter of fact, he's going to move on into Ecclesiastes later and say that pursuing all of that fulfillment that way led to my life feeling meaningless. But when it was one, it gave life meaning. Now, some people look at this and go, well, wait a minute, are you telling me, like, this is our culture, this is what our culture says. Are you telling me that I'm supposed to sexually be with one person my entire life? That sounds crazy boring. Like, that sounds like I'm having to give up a lot. Do you know what they call a person who devotes their entire life to one thing over and over again over an extended? That's literally the definition for a word. The word is expert. God is calling you to a lifetime pursuit of passion together with somebody to where you go, I am an expert in all things her. And I'm an expert in all things him. Because I have done this the right way and we've sealed this in our hearts together. I love how 1 Corinthians 6:20 says this. It says your body, talking about sexuality, it says your body is meant to glorify the Lord. It's talking about sex, and it says your body is meant to glorify the Lord. Do you get what that says? That means that sex is an act of worship unto God when done the right way. Amen. Dude. Some of you guys need to go home with your spouse and be like, let's go worship. Like, how incredible is that? Sex in a covenant is worship and pleasing to God. But here's the thing. We cannot demand it or withhold it. In Song of Solomon 4:12 and 16, he says, my sister, my bride is a locked garden and a sealed spring. He says, right now, for whatever reason, this isn't the time. She's not in the mood. I have no idea what the deal is. But listen, I love this. Her response is, as he begins to move towards her in intimacy and in emotional connection, she says, awaken north wind, come south wind, blow on my garden and spread the fragrance of its spices. Let my love come into the garden and taste its choicest fruits. He doesn't demand it. Remember, it's a gift. It is given. So there is no demand on sexuality, but there's also no withholding. Each one is giving themselves to the other. That's why you see in 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 5, it says, now in response to the matters you wrote about, so this was an issue in Corinth, it is good for a man not to use a woman for sex. But because sexual immorality is so common, each man should have sexual relationships with his own wife. Great counsel, by the way. And each woman should have sexual relations with her own husband. A husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife. That is to love her and to value her and to treasure her and support her and to do all those things. And likewise, a wife to her husband. A wife does not have rights over her own body. Her husband does. And in the same way, a husband does not have rights over his body. His wife does. Do not deprive one another. Don't withhold. Except when you agree for a time to devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, otherwise Satan may tempt you because you lack self-control. And so some of you read that, and the part that scares you is, wait a minute, like there's a time for fasting sexually? Yeah, Now some of y'all are going, that's not a problem. We've been fasting sexually for a while. So that's not mutual agreement for the purpose of connecting to God. That's different. I thought about how to say this. We want, as husbands, we need to give our wives the emotional connection that they so long for, and then wives to give that physical intimacy, and there's a connection between the two. And I thought, man, how do I say that as a guy without coming across the wrong way? And so I found this author named Sarah Emerson that I thought said it so beautifully. And here's what she said. She says, wives, we might better be able to understand this if we think about how, if we think how it might feel if our husbands only wanted to talk or listen to us once a week or a couple of times a month. Being deprived of emotional release would make most women miserable. So we need to understand that this is a give and take. This is no demanding, but it's no withholding, and that we share in this together. And it's important that we're motivated rightly. I remember I one time asked Crystal, what do I do that just really gets you going? And she told me, when you vacuum. Man, I started vacuuming 3 times a day. It was and I'm just check it out. I got 2. The problem was what I was doing was motivated almost like a transaction. I'll provide a good in service, and then you can provide a good in service. And that's not what this is about. See, if I'm going to serve her, I serve her just because I love her and because she has a need that I want to fulfill. And when she serves me simply because she loves me and has a need that she can fulfill for me. And it's such a beautiful picture when we exchange genuine love without expectation of something in return. Now, there's a tension that we have to understand when it comes to sexual intimacy, and that is that men often need to make love before they feel loved, and women also often need to feel loved before they make love. And it's designed with that tension for a reason. God wants you to both have a desire to fulfill the other person's need. And I'm going to tell you this, though. Who should initiate? Men. If you're going, man, I want her to feel loved with no agenda. Take your agenda off the table, guys. I don't need anything from you. I just want to serve you. Take some responsibilities off her plate. Watch the kids for a while. Take some action and do something that she would normally do. Give that woman a spa day. Let her feel loved. And you'd be surprised at how that comes back. Now, there's a couple of marriage killers I want to address really quickly. See, a man's visual wiring can draw you closer together or tear you apart. And ladies, you hear that and go, yeah, dang right, talk about this. But I'm just going to be honest. And not every man is into that. And not every woman is into this. But here's the truth, ladies. A lot of you won't maybe look at certain images, but you'll dive into books like 50 Shades of Grey, and you'll siphon off your affection in another way and simply justify it because it's not physical. Either one is searching for something that you should be looking for in your marriage in a different place. And you need to be careful of that. It's damaging. It destroys emotional connection and sexual intimacy. Here's a couple of marriage killers. One, unrealistic images. I told you this is super practical today. Stay with me. We used to live in a culture where you had to go find it. Now, they find you. Everything you watch, everything you go, you can Google search Jesus in an image search on Google and get stuff that you have no business looking at. It is amazing how this happens in our culture. The average age that a young man in our culture today is experiencing hardcore pornography is 11. That's the average. It is artificial intimacy without any emotional connection. As a matter of fact, I couldn't even get my head around this. It blew my mind. Porn sites were visited last year more than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. We live in a culture that wants to separate a physical act from our spiritual health, and we cannot do it. Men that are ages 18 to 23, 86% of them claim to have a problem with pornography. 33% of women in that same bracket. So it's clearly a problem for both, but for men, it is off the charts. I didn't know this organization existed, but the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. I was like, I didn't know this was a thing. It is the top 1,600 divorce lawyers in our country. Last year, the president of that organization made this statement. Last year, he said, 8 years ago, pornography played zero role in the divorce of couples that we do litigation for. In that year, 2016, 56% list pornography as a primary reason for divorce. It hurts the intimacy. When you look at certain things, when you experience things outside of your marriage, we need to understand when we experience those things, it releases, I told you last week, it releases dopamine. It's the happy chemical of your brain. But it also releases what's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the same chemical that is released when a mother breastfeeds her child. It is what's called the bonding chemical. And so you can't control what your brain does during an experience of intimacy before you're married. When you look at images, you don't get control of that. When you experience those things, it creates bonding and it creates euphoria. It creates addiction. It gives the false sense of intimacy to something that you don't have to care about its feelings. It divorces humanity from an image, and we cannot do that. It is so damaging. And I don't have time to get into this too deep, but it's such an issue in our culture. People go, like, how do we deal with this? Let me tell you what the Bible says. In Ephesians 5:11 through 12, it says, don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful to even mention what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made visible. Listen, the enemy that we have has a heyday in the dark. You need to turn the lights on. That means you need to tell somebody. You need to get some help. You need to share this with somebody. Not only are the images harmful to us as men when we see it visually, but they destroy the women in our life because everything tells them they're supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way. And then inevitably age and kids and responsibilities do what they were always supposed to do. It puts time on your physical body and you start to feel discouraged. And that was never supposed to happen. Guys, we have to understand when our eyes wander, no matter what excuse you give, it does nothing but amplify the fear and insecurity that exists inside that person. Song of Solomon does a beautiful job. He says, my longing is for her alone. Even if she comes to bed for the 10th night in a row with the this is going nowhere flannel PJs on, I still only have a desire for her. Another thing that is a marriage killer is unrealistic expectations. We come in and one goes, I thought there was going to be romance. And the other one goes, I thought there was going to be more Xbox. I thought we were all going to be Cowboys fans and she likes the Packers. Or I thought that we were going to spend a lot more alone time, but she's always with her girlfriends. Or I thought when we had conflict, we were going to yell it out. And I thought we were going to sweep it under the rug. I thought we were going to get it to dad. Or I thought we were going to save. I thought we would do devotion together. I thought we weren't. I thought we would both clean the house. I thought we would have sex more frequently. We have these expectations. Let me tell you something that is a fundamental truth. Typically, expectations unspoken will usually go unmet. We need to begin to communicate these things. Because one of the worst expectations of our culture is what we expect about sex. See, sex is good. Sex is not God. And we live in a culture that almost puts them on equal playing field, and they're nowhere close. As a matter of fact, we live in a culture that almost says that if you don't have sex, you've somehow missed out on true fulfillment in life, and there's nothing that could be further from the truth. You can have an entire life lived without sex and still be fulfilled. So if you're single and you're going, man, listen, single is hard in our culture. But you know when else it was hard? In the first century. The only jobs that were typically reserved for single people in the first century was prostitution. They were considered to have no future and a drain on society. If a woman divorced, or if a woman was widowed rather, she had 2 years to remarry or she was fined by Caesar. And then Christianity comes along and it has radical views of sex and it has radical views of singleness. Sex is not our greatest need. Even if you find the absolute perfect couple that relate to each other in the perfect way, there is still a need that neither one can fulfill for each other. St. Augustus said this. He said, any man who knocks on the door of a brothel is secretly looking for God. And I would say that any woman who is tracking down an old high school flame on Facebook is actually secretly looking for God. Crystal and I got married in 1998, and we were really good ministry partners, and it was so romantic at first. It was really awesome. And as life went on, every church we were at exploded. And it was really cool to be a part of, and ministry was going great. And we were great partners in ministry. And terrible partners in marriage. And if I'm being honest, there were moments when Crystal just felt like church was a mistress that she couldn't compete with. Amen. That it got all my attention and affection and my free time, and she was left alone. And I kind of had the opinion, well, nobody needs to know that. I mean, we'll figure it out. And every once in a while, you get a weekend away, and you go to a hotel, and everybody's happy for 3 days, and you go, problem solved. It wasn't. And we fall back into the same exact patterns. And it was difficult. I think at some point we thought, well, if we have a longer marriages mean better marriages. And it turned out that for us, what we realized is the longer that we were married, the more irritable that we were, the louder that we were, the less patient that we were, the more resistant that we were, the more blame that we threw on each other. We had the same argument over and over and over and over and over. And one day we just kind of reach a point where you go, do we really want to keep doing this? Honestly? And I would love to tell you that in that moment in my life, I stepped forward as this great spiritual leader. But the truth was, it was my wife that said and identified that our biggest problem was not our relationship with each other. The biggest problem was our relationship with Christ. And we weren't cultivating emotional connection or physical intimacy with each other. We weren't fulfilling each other. And neither one of us, we were doing a great job of doing church, but we were doing a terrible job of connecting with Christ. And so our relationship needed to be restored. And it was restored through two things. And the first one was it was restored with truth. So if you find yourself in a bad way, I want to encourage you in this. Unconfessed sin typically equals repeated behavior. We all live in this place where we try to, there's the relationship that you actually have, and you have this beautiful screen you pull down in front of you for the rest of the world to look at. And what's behind that screen is broken and damaged. It's a facade. 80% of truth will never give you 100% of intimacy. And too often for us, we were trying to be honest to a degree with each other. And honestly, that was how we treated God also. God, I'll be mostly transparent with you, but I've got some stuff I need to hold on to. Can I just tell you, if you want some hope in this, whatever you think you're hiding from God, He already knows. And He loves you anyway. The second thing that was needed in our relationship, and we're still always working on this, is it was restored with forgiveness. Now, I'm not telling you, this is not abuse, okay? Please don't mishear me. But most of our relationships don't come crumbling down because of abuse. They come crumbling down because of little things that pile up over the years. And I'm just going to tell you, forgive that. Now, I know what the response is, and I get it. Well, if I forgive that, Jason, they win. False. That is a lie. If you forgive that, Christ wins. You get freed from bitterness and anger and frustration, and you get to walk in freedom. That's what forgiveness does. See, here's what I want you to know. Sex is standing naked and vulnerable in front of somebody that you're in a covenant with and saying, this is me, the good, the bad, the broken. And your spouse looks at you and says, I know everything about you. and I still love you. You are loved and you are mine. We have become one. And you fully know me and I fully know you. And I accept you. And I want to help make you better. And what that is for us is we need to understand is that's a picture of the gospel. That we stand naked in front of God, completely vulnerable. We stand ashamed and we say, God, this is me. The good, the bad, the broken, the miserable, the ashamed, the guilt, all of it, this is me. And God says, thank you. I love you anyway. That's right. There's nothing you could do that can make me love you less. I love you. I fully know you. No, God, you don't understand. Let me tell you some things about me, because it probably will impact how you love me. I've done this and this and this. And he goes, yep, fully know. Fully loved. Okay, I appreciate that, God. I realize that you have grace for good people, but I'm not one of them. I'm a bad person. And let me tell you the depth of my heart. God, even beyond and like deeper than all the things I've done, here's what's really the motivation of my heart. Here's how dark I am. And God goes, yeah, I know. And I love you. God wants us to experience emotional connection and intimacy because He wants us to experience with Him an emotional connection and intimacy. It's a picture of the love of God for us. It's a picture of the gospel. So if you're going to fight for it, don't just fight for it for the sake of your marriage. Fight for it for the sake of the gospel and the kingdom of God. Let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you for the morning and for the challenge for us today. God, no matter what the relationship is that we're in, I pray that you would challenge us, God.